Lisa had been a mountain guide for 6 years, but she never got tired of the Rocky Mountains in winter. The snow-covered peaks looked like something from a fairy tale, especially when the morning sun hit them just right. Today was supposed to be perfect for taking pictures of the winter landscape. She drove her old pickup truck up the winding mountain road, humming along to country music on the radio. Her camera equipment sat carefully packed in the back seat, along with her hiking gear and emergency supplies. Lisa always came prepared. That's what kept her alive in the mountains all these years. The weather report that morning had mentioned some snow, but nothing serious. Maybe 3 to 4 inches, they said. Perfect for getting those magical winter shots that her photography clients loved so much. She planned to spend 3 days camping and shooting photos at different spots along the mountain ridge. But weather in the mountains can change faster than you can blink. Around noon, Lisa noticed the sky getting darker. Not the gentle gray of light snow, but something heavier. The wind started picking up too, making her truck rock slightly as she drove along the narrow road. She turned up the radio to catch the weather update. Severe winter storm warning now, in effect for the entire mountain region, the radio announcer said. Temperatures dropping rapidly to minus 20 degrees. Heavy snow and dangerous winds expected for the next 4 days. 4 days? That wasn't what they said this morning. Lisa felt her stomach drop. She was already 15 miles from the nearest town, on a road that barely saw 1 car per day during winter. She pressed harder on the gas pedal, hoping to make it back to the main highway before things got really bad. But the truck had other plans. With a loud coughing sound, the engine started making weird noises. Then it began to shake. "Come on, old girl," Lisa said, patting the dashboard. "Just get me to the main road." The truck coughed again, louder this time. Black smoke started, coming from under the hood. Lisa quickly pulled over to the side of the narrow road and turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt scary, broken only by the wind whistling through the pine trees. She popped the hood and looked inside, but she wasn't a mechanic. All she could see was that something was definitely wrong, and it smelled like burning oil. Her hands were already getting cold in the few minutes she'd been outside. Lisa got back in the truck and tried starting it again. The engine turned over once, twice, then nothing. She tried her cell phone. No signal, just like she expected up here. Her GPS device showed her location, but when she tried to use it, the screen flickered and went black. The cold was already affecting her electronics. She looked around at the landscape. Pine trees covered in snow stretched in every direction. The road behind her disappeared around a curve, and ahead it climbed higher into the mountains. She hadn't seen another car in over an hour. The wind was getting stronger now, and she could see heavy snow clouds moving in fast from the west. This wasn't going to be a gentle snowfall. This was going to be a real mountain storm. Lisa forced herself to stay calm and think clearly. She had some emergency supplies in the truck, a sleeping bag, extra clothes, some food, water, and a small camping stove with 2 fuel canisters. She also had emergency flares in her hiking pack. That was good. She could survive for a few days if she was smart about it. She turned the truck's engine on again, just to run the heater and charge her phone a little. The engine worked for about 10 minutes before dying completely. At least the radio still worked on battery power. "The storm is moving in faster than expected," the weather report said. "Emergency services are advising everyone to stay indoors. Road crews are pulling back until conditions improve." Great. That meant no snowplows would be coming through, and definitely no rescue vehicles. Lisa was truly on her own. The first snowflakes started falling, big and heavy. Within an hour, she couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. The wind howled around the truck, making it rock back and forth. She could feel the temperature dropping by the minute. Lisa put on her warmest jacket and wool hat. She organized her supplies and tried to make the truck cab as comfortable as possible. The sleeping bag would help, but she knew the truck wouldn't stay warm for long without the engine running. She tried the radio again, hoping to hear that rescue teams were still operating, but the news wasn't good. The storm was being called the worst in 20 years. Roads were closing everywhere. Even the main highways were becoming dangerous. As darkness fell on her first night, Lisa realized she was in serious trouble. The storm wasn't going to pass quickly, and nobody knew where she was. She hadn't told anyone exactly which road she was taking for her photography trip. But Lisa wasn't the type to give up easily. She had survived difficult situations before. She would be smart, conserve her energy and supplies, and wait for the storm to pass. Someone would find her eventually. The wind kept getting stronger, shaking the truck like a toy. Snow was piling up fast against the windows. Lisa wrapped herself in the sleeping bag and tried to stay positive. She didn't know yet that this was just the beginning of the longest 4 days of her life. Lisa woke up shivering. Her breath came out in white puffs inside the truck cab, which meant the temperature had dropped way below freezing during the night. The windows were completely covered with snow on the outside and frost on the inside. She couldn't see anything beyond the glass. The storm was still raging. She could hear the wind howling like a wild animal, and the truck kept rocking back and forth. Snow was hitting the metal roof so hard it sounded like someone throwing rocks. She checked her watch. 6 in the morning. She had slept maybe 3 hours total, waking up every time the cold got too bad or the wind shook the truck too violently. Her feet felt like ice blocks, even inside her thick hiking boots. Lisa tried starting the engine again, hoping yesterday's problems were just temporary. The engine turned over weakly a few times, then made a clicking sound and died. She tried again. Nothing. The battery was getting weaker, and the cold wasn't helping. She turned on the radio, using up precious battery power, but needing to know what was happening. The news wasn't good. "The storm has intensified overnight," the reporter said. "Wind speeds are reaching 60 miles per hour in mountain areas. Emergency crews cannot respond to calls until conditions improve. If you're stuck somewhere, stay put and wait for help. Stay put." Easy for them to say when they were sitting in warm radio stations. Lisa took inventory of her supplies again. 2 bottles of water, some energy bars, trail mix, and a few cans of soup. The small camping stove had 2 fuel canisters, enough for maybe 4 or 5 hot meals if she was careful. She also had 3 emergency flares in her hiking pack. The cold was becoming a real problem. Even wrapped in her sleeping bag with all her extra clothes on, she couldn't stop shivering. She knew that was her body's way of trying to generate heat, but it was also burning energy she couldn't afford to waste. Around noon, Lisa made a decision that scared her. She needed to get out of the truck and try to signal for help. Maybe a plane would fly over, or maybe there was a house or cabin nearby that she couldn't see through the storm. Getting out of the truck was like stepping into a freezer. The wind immediately cut through her jacket like it was made of paper. Snow hit her face so hard it felt like tiny needles. She could barely see 5 feet in front of her. Lisa fumbled with one of the emergency flares, her fingers already getting numb. She managed to light it, and the bright red light cut through the white storm. She held it up high, waving it back and forth, hoping someone, somewhere, might see it. The flare burned for about 2 minutes before going out. She stood there in the howling wind, listening for any sound of a helicopter or airplane. Nothing, except the storm. Getting back to the truck was harder than she expected. The wind had already covered her footprints with new snow, and everything looked the same in the white chaos. For a terrifying moment, she thought she had lost the truck completely. Then she saw the dark shape through the snow and stumbled toward it. Back inside, Lisa's whole body was shaking from cold and fear. That little adventure outside had shown her just how dangerous her situation really was. The storm wasn't just bad weather. It was deadly. She needed heat, and she needed it soon. The truck's interior was already feeling like a refrigerator. Lisa looked around for anything she could burn safely. The floor mats were rubber. They might work. She also had some papers in her glove compartment and an old towel in the back. Lisa opened the back door of the truck and tried to set up a small fire using the truck as a windbreak. But the wind kept blowing out her matches, and the snow put out any small flames before they could catch properly. After 20 minutes of trying, she gave up and got back inside. That's when she remembered something from her survival training: body heat. She needed to conserve every bit of warmth her body produced. Lisa took off her wet outer jacket and put on a dry sweater from her bag. Then she wrapped the sleeping bag around her entire body, covering even her head, leaving just a small opening to breathe. It helped a little, but not enough. She could feel the cold creeping deeper into her body. Her fingers were getting clumsy, and her thinking felt slower. These were warning signs she recognized from her mountain guide training, early stages of hypothermia. As the second night approached, Lisa tried the radio one more time. The battery was getting weaker, and the sound was fading. "Search and rescue operations remain suspended," the faint voice said. "The storm is expected to continue for at least 3 more days." 3 more days. Lisa looked at her small pile of food and the 2 fuel canisters for her camping stove. She was going to have to be very, very careful with everything. The wind picked up again as darkness fell, shaking the truck so hard that Lisa worried it might tip over. Snow was piling up against the windows, making the inside feel like a cave. She was buried alive in a metal tomb with only the storm for company. But Lisa wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. She had survived tough situations before. She would make it through this too. She had to. By the 3rd morning, Lisa knew she was in real trouble. She woke up and couldn't feel her toes at all. When she tried to wiggle her fingers, they moved slowly, like they didn't belong to her. Her whole body felt stiff and cold, like she was made of ice. The storm was still going strong outside. If anything, it sounded worse than before. The wind screamed around the truck, and she could hear tree branches breaking somewhere in the distance. Snow had completely covered all the windows now. She was trapped inside a white tomb. Lisa tried to sit up and immediately felt dizzy. That wasn't good. She recognized the signs from her mountain rescue training. Her body temperature was dropping to dangerous levels. She was moving into serious hypothermia territory. Her water bottles had started to freeze overnight. She had to keep them inside her sleeping bag to prevent them from turning into solid ice. Her food was frozen too, making the energy bars hard as rocks. Even eating had become difficult. The radio battery finally died during the night. Now she had no way to know what was happening in the outside world. The silence inside the truck, broken only by the howling wind, felt crushing. Lisa looked at her remaining supplies. 1 fuel canister for the camping stove was empty. She had used it to heat some soup and melt snow for drinking water. The 2nd canister was half full. Maybe enough for 2 more hot meals if she was very careful, but it wasn't enough. The cold was winning, and she could feel her body giving up the fight. That's when Lisa noticed something that made her heart sink even more. Her extra clothes, the ones she had been saving for emergencies, were damp from condensation inside. The truck. Wet clothes in this cold were worse than no clothes at all. They would steal heat from her body instead of keeping it in. She held up her spare socks. They were stiff with ice crystals. Her backup sweater felt clammy and cold. Even her hiking journal, where she wrote notes about mountain conditions, was damp and starting to freeze. Lisa stared at these items and realized something that scared her. She was going to have to make a choice that went against everything she had ever learned about survival. She was going to have to destroy her own supplies to stay alive. The idea came to her slowly, like a whisper in her mind. Fire. She needed fire, and she needed it inside the truck where the wind couldn't put it out. But she had nothing left to burn except her own belongings. Her hands shook as she picked up the damp socks. They were wool. They would burn, even wet. The spare cotton t-shirt would burn too. Her hiking journal had pages and pages of notes, from years of mountain trips, but paper burned hot and fast. Lisa set up her camping stove in the back of the truck, as far from the gas tank as possible. She opened the windows just a crack to let out any dangerous fumes, even though it meant letting in the freezing air. She started with one page from her journal, just one page with notes about a trip from last summer. The paper caught fire quickly, burning bright orange in the dim truck. The warmth felt incredible on her face, even for just a few seconds. Then she added a sock. The wool smoked and smelled terrible, but it burned steady and gave off real heat. For the first time in days, Lisa felt warm air around her. It was working, but it broke her heart. Each piece of clothing she burned was something she might need later. Each page from her journal contained memories of beautiful mountain adventures. But staying alive was more important than saving things. She burned the spare t-shirt next, piece by piece. Then another page from the journal. The inside of the truck started to warm up, just a little. Steam rose from her wet hair and clothes. As they began to dry out, Lisa rationed the burning carefully. A sock here, a few pages there. She made each small fire last as long as possible, warming her hands and face before the flames died out. The smoke made her cough, but the heat was saving her life. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the truck, Lisa had created a tiny pocket of warmth. Her toes started to tingle as feeling came back to them. Her fingers became more flexible. The dangerous dizziness began to fade. As night fell on her third day, Lisa looked at what remained of her extra supplies. Half her backup clothes were gone, burned for heat. Her journal was missing dozens of pages, but she was still alive and her body temperature was stable. She knew this couldn't last forever. Tomorrow she would run out of things to burn. The camping stove fuel was almost gone. Her food was running low. But tonight, wrapped in her sleeping bag in the slightly warmer truck, Lisa allowed herself to hope. Maybe the storm would end tomorrow. Maybe someone would find her. Maybe she would figure out another way to survive. She had to believe that because the alternative was too scary to think about. Lisa closed her eyes and tried to sleep, listening to the wind outside and holding onto the small bit of warmth she had created from her own sacrifice. Lisa woke up on the fourth morning, but something was wrong with her mind. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The truck felt like a strange place, and she couldn't figure out why everything was so cold and white. Then reality crashed back. The storm, the broken truck, 3 days of fighting to stay alive. She was still trapped, and now her brain was playing tricks on her. That was a very bad sign. Her body felt different too, weaker. When she tried to sit up, her muscles didn't want to work properly. Her hands looked pale and waxy, and she couldn't make a tight fist anymore. The tips of her fingers had turned an alarming grayish color. Frostbite. She recognized it from her mountain guide training, but seeing it on her own hands made her stomach drop. Her toes felt completely numb now, like blocks of wood attached to her feet. The storm outside sounded quieter, but when she scraped frost off the window to look out, she still couldn't see more than a few feet. Snow continued to fall, though, not as heavily as before. Everything looked the same, white, endless, and empty. Lisa's food was almost gone. She had 2 energy bars left and about half a bottle of water that she kept liquid by holding it close to her body. The camping stove. Fuel was finished. She had burned the last of her extra clothes yesterday, but the worst part was her mind. She kept seeing things that weren't there. A few times, she thought she heard her mother calling her name. Once, she was sure someone was knocking on the truck window, but when she looked, there was nothing but snow. She knew what this meant. Her brain wasn't getting enough oxygen because her body was shutting down to save energy for vital organs. She was dying slowly but surely. Lisa found her phone and turned it on, using the last bit of battery power. No signal as expected, but she could still use the voice recorder. If someone found her truck later, at least they would know what happened. "This is Lisa Chen," she said into the phone, her voice sounding weak and strange. "It's day 4 in the storm. If you're hearing this, I probably didn't make it. Tell my family I love them. Tell them I fought as hard as I could." She paused, trying to think of other important things to say. The storm came in faster than predicted. My truck broke down on Forest Road 285, about 15 miles from Pine Valley. I had supplies, but not enough for this long. Her voice was getting quieter. The phone was almost dead. "I want people to know that I didn't give up. I burned my clothes to stay warm. I tried everything I could think of, but sometimes that's just not enough." The phone died before she could say more. Lisa sat in the cold silence, feeling strangely peaceful. She had done everything possible. No one could have asked for more. If this was how her story ended, at least she had fought with courage. But then, she remembered something. In all her panic and survival efforts, she had forgotten to really explore the area around her truck. Maybe there was something nearby that could help. An old cabin, a shed, anything that might offer better shelter. The idea of going back outside terrified her. She was so weak now, and the cold would hit her even harder. But what did she have to lose? Staying in the truck meant dying slowly. At least outside, she might find something. Lisa wrapped herself in the sleeping bag like a cloak and forced the truck door open. The wind immediately tried to push her back inside, but she stumbled forward into the snow. Walking was incredibly difficult. The snow was up to her waist in some places, and her legs felt like rubber. Every step took enormous effort. She could only see a few feet ahead, but she kept moving, using the truck as her anchor point. That's when she found it. About 50 yards from the truck, almost invisible in the storm, she discovered the remains of an old stone foundation. It was just a rectangle of rocks sticking up through the snow, but it meant someone had built something here once. Maybe there were other structures nearby. Lisa searched around the foundation and found pieces of old wood buried in the snow. Broken boards, part of a roof beam, even some rusty metal that might once have been a stovepipe. It wasn't much, but it was something to burn. She also found something even better. A small depression in the ground near the foundation that was partially protected from the wind. If she could build a windbreak using the truck and some of the old wood, she might be able to create a better shelter. Lisa gathered as much of the old wood as she could carry and struggled back to the truck. Her hands were so numb she could barely hold on to anything, but determination kept her moving. Back at the truck, she had one emergency flare left. Just one. She had been saving it for a real emergency, but this felt like the right time. If there was any chance of rescue, this would be her last opportunity to signal for help. Lisa climbed onto the truck's hood, held the flare high above her head, and lit it. The bright red light cut through the storm like a beacon. She waved it, back and forth, putting everything she had left into this final attempt. The flare burned bright against the white storm, a tiny spot of hope in an endless wilderness of cold and snow. Ben Rodriguez had been driving snowplows for 12 years, and he knew these mountain roads better than anyone. But today, his supervisor had ordered all the crews to stay on the main highways. The back roads were too dangerous, and the county didn't want to risk losing equipment or drivers in the worst storm anyone could remember. Ben sat in his big orange snowplow, clearing Highway 40 for the 10th time that day. The snow kept coming down so fast that roads were covered again within an hour of being plowed. It felt like fighting a war he couldn't win. But something caught his eye as he made another pass near Pine Valley. Far off in the distance, through the thick snow, he saw a tiny red glow. It flickered for a moment, then disappeared. Ben slowed down and strained his eyes, trying to see it again. There it was, a faint red light, way up on one of the side roads that led into the forest. It was probably nothing, maybe just his eyes playing tricks on him, but something in his gut told him to pay attention. Ben had grown up in these mountains. His father had taught him that when you see something unusual in the wilderness, especially during a storm, you don't ignore it. That little red light might be someone's last hope. He grabbed his radio and called his supervisor. "Hey, Tony, I'm seeing some kind of signal light up on Forest Road 285. Might be someone in trouble?" "Negative, Ben," came the reply. "You stick to the main roads? We can't. Risk losing a plow up there. Emergency services will handle it when the storm passes." Ben stared up at the mountain where he had seen the light. Emergency services weren't operating. The storm wasn't going to pass for another day or two. If someone was up there signaling for help, they might not survive that long. He thought about his own family, his wife and 2 kids safe at home. What if it was them up there, trapped and freezing, hoping someone would see their signal? What if it was his own daughter fighting for her life in the cold? Ben made a decision that could cost him his job. He turned off his radio and pointed the snowplow toward Forest Road 285. The narrow mountain road was completely buried under 4 feet of snow. The plow worked hard, pushing through drifts that came up to the windshield. Tree branches, heavy, with snow, kept falling across his path. Twice he almost got stuck in deep snow that had blown into gullies. But Ben kept going. Every few minutes he stopped and looked around, hoping to see that red light again. The storm was starting to calm down a little, but visibility was still terrible. After 20 minutes of dangerous driving, Ben saw something dark sticking up through the snow ahead. As he got closer, he realized it was the back end of a pickup truck, almost completely buried. Ben jumped down from his plow and fought through the deep snow to reach the truck. He could see someone inside, a woman wrapped in a sleeping bag, barely moving. She looked up at him through the frost-covered window, and he could see the shock in her eyes. She probably thought she was seeing things. Ben pounded on the window. "Hey! Can you hear me? I'm here to help." The woman tried to open the door, but it was stuck with ice and snow. Ben used his shovel to clear it away and finally got the door open. Cold air rushed out of the truck, and he could see the woman was in bad shape. Her lips were blue. Her hands looked frostbitten, and she was shaking uncontrollably. "Thank goodness," she whispered, so quietly he could barely hear her. I thought I was going to die up here." "Not today," Ben said firmly. "What's your name?" "Lisa," she managed to say through chattering teeth. "Okay, Lisa. I'm Ben, and I'm going to get you out of here. But first, we need to warm you up a little." Ben ran back to his plow and grabbed his emergency medical kit and some extra blankets he always carried. He also had a thermos of hot coffee that his wife had made him that morning. He wrapped Lisa in the warm blankets and gave her small sips of coffee. She was suffering from serious hypothermia and frostbite, but she was conscious and talking. That was a good sign. "How long have you been here?" Ben asked as he helped her into the warm cab of his snowplow. 4 days, Lisa said. "My truck broke down right when the storm hit. I burned my clothes to stay warm. I used my last flare to signal for help." Ben felt his heart clench. 4 days in this storm, and she had survived by burning her own clothes. This woman was incredibly tough. The trip down the mountain was scary. The snowplow slipped and slid on the icy road, and Ben had to go very slowly to avoid getting stuck or sliding off a cliff. But Lisa was getting warmer in the heated cab, and her color was starting to improve. At the hospital, doctors said Lisa was about 6 hours away from dying. Her body temperature was dangerously low, and the frostbite on her fingers and toes was severe. But she would live, and she would keep all her fingers and toes. 3 weeks later, Lisa visited Ben at the county maintenance garage. Her hands were still bandaged, but she was walking and talking normally. "The doctor said you saved my life," she told him. "But you risked your job to come find me. Why did you do that?" Ben thought about it for a moment. "I guess because that's what people do for each other," he said simply. "At least, that's what they should do. When someone needs help, you help them. It's not complicated." Lisa smiled, tears in her eyes. "Not everyone would have made that choice." "Maybe not," Ben said. but I couldn't live with myself if I had just driven away. Lisa went back to guiding people in the mountains, but now she also teaches wilderness survival courses. She tells everyone about the importance of emergency supplies and letting people know where you're going, but mostly she tells them about Ben, the snowplow driver who risked everything to save a stranger. Ben still drives his snowplow on the same mountain roads. He never got in trouble for going off route that day. His supervisor said saving a life was more important than following rules. And he still carries extra blankets and hot coffee just in case someone else needs help. Because that's what people do for each other.